Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I just realized that I am completely out of spaghetti sauce, specifically my meat spaghetti sauce. So we are going to be making that today, and then we are also going to be canning it. Besides being completely out of it, which is something that we use on a regular basis, I got this idea from Becky at Acres Homestead, who is another YouTuber, and she did a challenge recently where she dug into things in her kitchen pantry that had been there for a long time that she wanted to use up. And I have something that I have been staring at for a couple of weeks that I need to get rid of. Let me show it to you. Before I grew all my own tomatoes, I used to buy these huge crushed can of tomatoes. So this thing is probably like a couple of years old. It's close to still being good, so I'm gonna go ahead and use it. But anyway, that has been sitting in my pantry for a long time, and as you can imagine, it is taking up a lot of space. So I want to get this spaghetti sauce made from this instead of some of the tomatoes that I have in my freezer from my spring harvest. So come along with me, let's make some spaghetti sauce, and then I will show you how to pressure can spaghetti meat sauce so that you can leave it on the pantry shelf and not take up room in your freezer or in your refrigerator. There are a lot of steps, but they're all super easy and there's no reason to be scared. Pressure canning is completely safe. You just have to follow a recipe, a tested and safe recipe. So come along with me. Now let's get the sauce cooking first. I'll leave the tested and approved National Center for Home Food Preservation recipe in the description below. I'll start by browning the ground beef. I'm using just 1 pound, even though the recipe calls for more, but I'm just doing half the recipe due to the amount of crushed tomatoes I have on hand. While the meat is cooking, I'll chop the onions into a rough dice. I have some fairly small onions, so I'm doing 1.5 onions, which I had left over from a previous recipe. Now I'm adding minced garlic, about 4 to 5 cloves worth. I love garlic, so I always have a heavy hand. You might prefer 2 or 3 cloves instead. Now it's time for all the seasoning. The cool thing about canning is that seasoning is basically a free ingredient that won't affect the safety, so you can be more creative and stray from the recipe a little bit. I'm adding my homemade Italian seasoning that I grew in my garden. If you're interested in learning how to make some yourself, I'll add a link to this video. Next, I'm adding pepper and then seasoned salt. Seasoned salt is a combination of salt, onion powder, garlic powder, and paprika. Sometimes they contain other things as well. I usually like to make my own, but I have some store-bought stuff that we need to go through, so I'm using that today. Now I'll add the entire can of crushed tomatoes. Be careful, this stuff splatters. I like to grow my own tomatoes now, but this can dates back a couple years when I was only growing enough tomatoes for fresh eating. Back then. Since then, it's been sitting on my pantry shelf. It's my new mission to really start digging into my pantry and using ingredients that have been taking up space for a while. With the cost of food so high at the store now, it's a great time to really dig into the back of that pantry and get creative with the ingredients you have on hand. Now I'm going to add 1 to 2 tablespoons of sugar. I don't like a sweet spaghetti sauce, but the sugar doesn't actually sweeten the sauce. It just cuts the acidity of the sauce since there's so many tomato products in this recipe. I'd suggest adding just a tablespoon at a time and continue to taste it to make sure you actually like it. Now you just need to simmer the sauce for 2 to 3 hours depending on the thickness that you prefer. If you're using fresh tomatoes, some varieties will have a higher water content, so this part of the recipe could take much longer. Once the sauce is done cooking, prepare your pressure canner by adding 3 quarts of water and turn the heat on. You always want the water in the canner to be about the same temperature as the jars that are going in. This will ensure that the glass jars won't break due to the difference in temperature. Once the water is warm in the canner, start ladling the sauce into the clean canning jars. Leave 1 inch of headspace at the top of the jar. Wipe the rims very well. Some people like to use vinegar to clean the rim of the jars to make sure that there is no residue whatsoever that could keep the lids from sealing properly. Now we add the lids and screw on the bands fingertip tight. Don't be like my husband and He-Man the bands on. Imagine screwing them on tight enough that a 10-year-old can unscrew it. Place the jars in the pressure canner and seal the canner closed. Bring the heat up until the canner starts to vent and the button moves into the upright position. Allow the canner to vent for 10 minutes. This helps make sure that there's no air pockets inside the canner that are not heated up evenly. After it has vented for 10 minutes, place the weight on the canner and allow it to come to 11 pounds of pressure. If you don't have a dial gauge on your canner, just place the 10-pound weight and wait for it to begin to rock. That will tell you that you're up to pressure. Also make sure to check your altitude because this can affect the pounds of pressure or timing that you need to be using. When your canner reaches the appropriate pounds of pressure, your timer can begin. So that is 60 minutes for pints or 70 minutes for quarts. Make sure that your canner stays above or equal to that 11 pounds of pressure the entire time. Once your 70 minutes are up, turn off the heat on the canner and allow it to come down in pressure naturally. This can take some time. Once the pressure reaches 0, remove the weight and unseal the canner. At this point, I like to leave the jars in the canner for another 5 minutes or so, just so that they can adjust to the temperature change. Then I remove the jars from the canner and I let them rest on a towel on the countertop overnight. Then the next morning, I check to make sure that all of them have sealed correctly. Remove the bands and then I label the jars with their date and what is inside the jar so I don't forget later. Now your spaghetti sauce is ready to sit on your pantry shelf at room temperature. When I first started pressure canning meat, this really freaked me out, but one walk through the pasta aisle at your local grocery store made me realize that all these processed spaghetti sauce are pretty much done the same way we can them at home. Yeah, they probably have industrial-sized canners and extra ingredients to preserve the food chemically, but my home canning works exactly the same and I know exactly what is in it. I know it's safe because I followed all the steps that the National Center of Home Food Preservation requires. People have been canning food at home for a very long time. It is a skill that we left behind many years ago, but is still just as relevant today as it was back then. But maybe even safer now because we have this whole research center through the U.S. Department of Agriculture that tests all these recipes to ensure their safety. So get out there and give it a try. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you found this video helpful. It really helps me out.